Welcome to the very first, very exciting. The Master's Case is a subscription program that each of you have subscribed to. As I mentioned earlier, 1,800 people of Opimian members are members of the Master's Case. And this is the first of a regular tasting that Jane is going to do with you to discuss how she chose these wines and why she chose these wines and how they relate to one another, and tell us a little bit about the winemakers that make these wines. So it just happens to be that the first one was during CWeb, which was an online only bonus offering that was offered last October. Took us a while to get these wines to you through all the logistics channels. Shipping worldwide is a bit of a problem. There are no empty shipping containers is one of the problems. And a lot of the warehouses are on skeleton staff, so it's taking them a lot longer to process the wines. So I just actually noticed in this month's Wine Spectator, there's a good article about the issues around logistics in the wine business. So in what you'll be seeing in the next issue of Cellar is that this year's, what would have been CWeb 21, we have converted to a printed bonus offering. So you'll be getting a 10th bonus offering in the mail, and it's going to be substantial. I won't give you any more information than that. So I hope you look forward to that one. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the woman who needs no introduction. Jane Masters is our Master of Wine and has been for some time now, and our very own Master of Wine. And I can't wait to hear what she has to say about these three wines that are in the CWeb 20, the Master's Case. So over to you, Jane. Welcome. Thanks for joining us, Jane, at very late in the evening in England.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for that introduction, Michael. Yes, as Michael says, I'm in London. It's not that late, it's about 8 o'clock in the evening. But whereas I've just been hearing that you are in the middle of a heat wave in many parts of Canada, we've actually just had the most horrendous rain downpour. It's like winter here. It's quite grey outside. It almost looks like it's nightfall, which it's not meant to get dark for another hour at least. But so we've had torrential rain, but at least my internet is working. My bottles are open, and I'm very, very excited to be here for this first the Master's Case tasting. It is the first one we've ever done, so it's gonna be a bit of a let's suck it and see how it goes, because what I'd like to do, but which might be a bit of a challenge, is to make this as interactive as possible. So any questions that people have, please type them into the chat. I will try and keep an eye on them, but my trusty colleague here, Michael, is going to definitely keep an eye on them. And if there are any specific questions to be asked or any specific themes that come out that I have neglected to answer, then he will no doubt let me know. So let's get on with the tasting, I guess. Michael did ask me to do a quick introduction of myself before we sort of get into the tasting. So I'm not sure how many members are completely new to Opimian. Some of the names and faces I recognise, a few others you may have been around for a while, but we may not have met before. But I have been the consultant to Opimian for the last 10 years or so. So my role really is in tasting, selecting specific wines for each cellar offering, working with the producers that Opimian works with to come up with really interesting wines. And I'm always looking for new wines, new regions, new opportunities, but really looking to find the best wines and the best value wines that we can offer members. So everything that goes into a cellar offering is tasted by me when I make the final selection, but obviously throughout the course of the year, normally, not so much in the last year, but normally I would spend quite a large amount of my time traveling around to wine regions, visiting wineries, going to trade shows and looking out for those new producers and new gems of wines. I think that's as much as I will say now. As I say, we want this to be interactive. So I'm going to talk mainly about the Master's Case wines, but if you have any questions about those wines or anything more generally about wine or about Opimian, please, as I say, just put it into the chat. The 3 wines that we're going to be tasting are from the Ardèche. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's in southern France. It's to the west of the Rhone region. It's actually quite a stunning region. And although it's quite far south, it sits in the Cevennes Mountains, which means that much of the landscape is dominated by those mountains. The Ardèche River itself, which has carved its way through the mountains. The Ardèche is a tributary of the Rhone River, and the region has some of the most amazing canyons and gorges and waterfalls in the whole of France. It's off the beaten track slightly. It's not that far from the Rhone, but it is definitely a tourist destination somewhere that if you're into kayaking or canoeing or outdoor rock climbing, it's definitely a place to visit. And it's definitely a place to visit for wine too. So it's close to the Rhone. Many of the grape varieties traditionally were similar ones to the Rhone, so Grenache and Syrah, but actually more recently, they have also planted varieties like Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we taste through the wines, but that's essentially because we do have this impact of the altitude. So although you're southern France, it's warm climate, you've got the altitude, which means that at night temperatures drop and we get sort of quite high natural levels of acidity in the grapes. They get very ripe, but they have this sort of tangy character to them, which you will taste, I think, in the wines. Now, I'm not sure whether everyone has got all 3 wines lined up and open in front of you. You may or you may not have. You may want to taste or you may want to listen. I actually opened my 3 bottles probably about an hour and a half ago. So I've got, I'm going to start and taste them in the order that you see them on the sheet, the little leaflet that came within your box. So we're going to start with Merlot. I'm then going to go on to do the Colline d'Esprit, which is a Grenache Syrah blend. And then we're going to finish on the Jean Esprit, which is a Merlot with Cabernet Sauvignon. I think the first thing I would say for me, and it's been a year nearly since I last tasted these wines. So these were selected about this time last year for the C Web offering. So it's really interesting for me to see how they have developed over that time. And you know, sometimes when I'm writing the Cellar offerings, obviously the wines have been selected at a given sort of point in time, if you like, and so they're evaluated at that point of time. And then I sort of look in this crystal ball and try to sort of picture how they're going to evolve over time and how they're going to taste and how long they're going to last and when they're going to be at their peak. And I have to say, tasting all 3 of these wines today, first of all, I found that there is definitely a house style here. And I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier, this impact of altitude. So if you smell and taste these wines, you will see that they have quite what I would call a mineral quality, which is sort of similar to acidity, if you like. It has a very vibrant, lots of fruit character, but this acidity that makes it a little bit tight and nice, gives it nice structure. And that I find in all 3 of the wines. The other thing that I see in all 3 of the wines is they're all pretty deep in colour, deep sort of plum colour. Colour is related, it gives you some idea of a wine. First of all, it's related to the grape varieties that we're tasting. So all of the grape varieties that we're tasting today would be quite coloured, but if you compare them, for example, to a Pinot Noir or a Nebbiolo from Italy, the wines are likely to be a lot lighter in colour. So these are very intense, very dense wines. And they've also got the hue. So when a young red wine. It is very young. It has more of a sort of purpley ruby color to it, and as it ages it becomes more ruby, and then obviously as it gets older and older it develops this sort of more orangey brick ruby color. Ultimately, when wines are very, very old, they can look quite brown or tawny. But these are all looking, you know, they are 2019. They're looking intense in color, nice ruby, good depth to them. All quite similar. You will see though that I would say the straight Merlot, the first one, if you compare it to the third wine, which is mainly Merlot, but with some Cabernet Sauvignon in there, 10% Cabernet Sauvignon, you should see that they're pretty close, but slightly darker. The Cabernet Sauvignon just adds that little bit more color. So Merlot. Merlot, I think, is often denigrated, and I think it got a bad reputation going back to things like the film Sideways, when I don't know how many of you have actually ever saw that film, where Miles goes off on his trek up to Napa and is quite derogatory about Merlot, and I think that to a certain extent that sort of has stuck in people's minds. But don't forget that Merlot makes some of the most amazing and most expensive wines in the world. So in the on the right bank of Bordeaux, Saint-Emilion, Pomerol, which I know are favourites of Michael.
True.
Merlot is the basis of those wines. So when it's made right, when it's grown, and it doesn't like too much heat, Merlot, it likes a warm climate to get ripe, but it doesn't like it to be too hot. And it just seems to me that this little domain in the Ardèche has just got exactly the right conditions to make this really nice ripe fruit character with that acidity. I should mention the domain itself. So Domaine de Mermez, I haven't ever been there. I have been to the Ardèche on many an occasion, but this is a small domain, 25 hectares. It's at an altitude of about 360 meters. So the Ardèche there's quite a lot of vineyards there. It makes quite a lot of wine, but is really dominated by what we call the cave coopérative in France. So many people would grow grapes and take it to the cooperative, and they're making sort of big blends of pretty good, but not such distinctive wines. So Domaine de Mermez is really quite special. Patrice and his wife Séverine represent the fourth generation. So Patrice took over from his father. They're in the process of converting all the vineyards. I think it's 25 hectares in total, converting that to organic farming, which is great. And they also grow a lot of lavender and produce other essential oils. But going back to the Merlot, for me, it's just got this lovely sort of black cherry, ripe fruit aroma. I have to admit, I opened it, as I said, 2 hours ago. When I first opened the bottle, it was a little bit what I call tight or shy. It wasn't very expressive at first. So I definitely think that if you are going to enjoy these wines at their best, it's worth actually opening them a little bit earlier, even pouring some into a glass, or if you want to decant them, just to get some air into them, not to decant it off of sediment in any way, but sometimes just to air the red wines a little bit helps bring out a lot of the aromas and flavors. I haven't decanted them, but I have had them sort of poured in the glass and been swirling them from time to time, which is really the same thing. So going back to the wine, it's got those same, for me, sort of like griotte cherry, sour cherry flavors, lots of nice middle palate, but it's that acidity, that tanginess, that sour cherry character that gives this wine its vivacity and length. I think it's a really nice wine. that has matured nicely over the last year. It's still got plenty, you know, a couple of good years ahead of it. There's no rush to drink it, which is good if it's only just arrived in Canada, I guess. And I would happily drink that with quite, I mean, anything really, from sort of fairly simple pasta, tomato-based sauce dishes, pizza, but equally it will stack up with sort of burgers, steaks, will go nicely. I don't know, Michael, Kim Chen, I think you've got some of the bottles in front of you, haven't you?
And this just our foodie said it would be rôti de côte sur pied. No, that's in French.
You've got French one.
Yeah, pourquoi? But yeah, I think that's one of the things about Merlot, right? Is that it can go up or down from, it's not a really heavy red and it's not a really light red. So
yeah, it's never on its own. It's never got, well, I say it's never got huge structure, but that's not true. If I go back to Saint-Emilion and Pomerol, but in most other places that Merlot is grown, it has a sort of fleshiness to it, a plumpness of fruit, but it's not hugely tannic. I mean, this has got some nice tannin, but it's really the acidity that keeps it alive and is giving it the potential for some more maturation. I think it's showing really nicely. I don't think there's a hurry to drink it. What might be interesting is to carry on and taste the other two, and then we'll come back and sort of compare some things side by side. And when I'm tasting wines for the cellar offerings, you may not be aware, but literally I will line up all the wines that end up in the cellar offering plus a load more. So I'm constantly comparing and contrasting different wines, looking for how they compare to each other, so that we offer you different styles and different flavor profiles. Also how they evolve. So many of the wines that I taste, I will leave the bottles open for a couple of days and go back to them 2-3 times, because that gives me an indication of how they will mature over time once they're in people's cellars. So the second wine, or the middle wine, Colline d'Esprit, this is a much more traditional blend of the Ardèche. So the Ardèche produces a lot of Syrah and Grenache. It also produces Gamay, but we don't have any of that today. And I think if you smelling this in comparison, if you have got the bottles open side by side, this wine has a much more sort of meaty, slightly leathery note on the nose, and that's coming from the Syrah. So what I would say, I think when I went back to my tasting notes last year, I think it had I think I put a mineral sort of earthy character, and that's now sort of mellowed a bit and become more of this. It's more like a grassy, slightly, as I say, hint of leather on the nose, which gives it lots of sort of spicy character. Again, it's medium bodied, got a very juicy acidity, this sort of, I would say, almost crunchy acidity, and that's the house style that I see coming through in all of these. And as I said earlier, which relates, in my view, to the altitude at which these grapes are grown. So whilst it's warm during the day and it's sunny during the summer months, the grapes can ripen, but because of the altitude, the temperature drops at night, and that's what retains this natural tangy acidity in the wines. So if I don't know, I'm not sure what was recommended as the food offering here. It put duck breast, but that today I would say, because of that spicy leather, peppery character, for me this would be a great match with something like a steak with some sort of, with either just cracked black pepper or some sort of pepper sauce on top. I think that spiciness would go really, really nicely with that. Mm-hmm. And then moving on to the third wine. So this is a 90%, so it's called Jean Esprit. I think that was Patrice's grandfather. It's named after, I think I'm correct, it could be his father. This This, if you think the first one was 100% Merlot, it's worth trying them side by side, because that will give you an understanding of what Cabernet Sauvignon brings to a blend in not just in the Ardèche, but in many regions in Bordeaux, wherever you have Bordeaux blends, California, South Africa. You should feel that on that last wine, it has what we call much more structure to it. So you can feel the tannins coming through on the finish. Whereas the first wine, it was the tangy acidity that keeps it alive. The third wine, that extra bit of Cabernet Sauvignon has just given it tannin. And if you want to try and think about what tannin is, think about tea. Stewed tea can be very tannic and astringent. It dries your mouth. Think about the outside of walnuts, the skin around a walnut. Again, it can be very bitter and very astringent. It dries out your mouth. And obviously in a wine, we don't want it to go to that extreme, but we want it to be like a nice cup of tea where it's not stewed, but the tea has just been in contact for the right amount of time, left to macerate, and it's what gives you the structure on the palate. So I don't know whether people, I mean, how do people feel? Do people understand? Can you see that difference if you have the wines open side by side? Yeah, I can see a few people nodding. I can't see everyone on my screen, so
no, so type away, everybody. But that is the thing. Well, while we're waiting for people to ask some questions, Jane, it was very interesting as we developed CWeb 20 that most of these wines never have left Europe before.
Yeah.
They were all typically. So, go ahead.
As everyone is aware, I mean, last year was a very difficult year for everybody everywhere around the world, and particularly difficult for. In fact, no, it was a game of two halves in the wine trade, I would say. So for wine producers that tend to be of a certain size, that have distribution through retail outlets, through supermarkets, and who had wines to sell, they generally did pretty well. But for little producers like Domaine de Malmez, who are in a tourist destination region, producers like them who either supply to passing tourists or who are dependent on the restaurant trade, be it their local restaurant trade or within France or even internationally, those guys really struggled last year. And that was some of our thinking behind CWeb last year. Obviously this year there's still the impact of COVID, but on top of that, we've also had some pretty serious frosts throughout France. So back in April or May, I'm trying to think when it was now, we had some serious frosts that have in some cases wiped the crop level right down, knocked it right down to the extent that the French government are sort of stepping in and trying to help subsidize people. So it's a bit too early to tell. We know that some of our producers have been hit in certain areas. You may, depending on the weather and the climate between now and harvest time, which is generally end of August, September, you may get some of it back if you have what we call second generation buds, but quite often they are so late that the grapes never quite ripen before they're picked, so we can't rely on that. So I think it's going to be another tricky year for a different reason this year.
Yeah. Just must be wonderful being a winemaker. Oh boy.
You've got to have you've got to
resilient, be resilient.
Have resilience, yeah. And isn't that a key word that everyone's been talking about the last 12 months as well? Resilience is such an important part of any business when it comes to crisis. But if you're dealing with nature at the moment, more and more extreme climate conditions happening, then resilience is really important.
So Jane, Connie's asking you to go through the nose on the third wine again, please, on 2130.
Yeah. So first of all, I would say if you compare it to the first one had that sort of cherries and mulberries and sort of quite lots of red fruits. The third one, I would say, is a little bit less crushed, sort of crushed red fruits. It's got some nice black cherry. It's got some nice spice. Just a touch of what I would call not slightly smoked, but more like pencil lead slightly, although pencil lead is often something that I associate with oak aging. This hasn't had any oak. But that definitely that cassis character that comes through. So it's, for me, it's more black cherry. It's got cassis or black currant, like really pure, fresh black currant. And that is definitely a sign, an aroma that comes from Cabernet Sauvignon, definitely, and in some cases Merlot too. But here I think it is the Cabernet, because I don't get so much cassis on the first one. That's more sort of, as I say, mulberries, red cherries, loganberries, all those sort of nice, plump, sort of mushy, crushed red fruits. And
then also about the pairings with this is that with the tomatoes, with the pasta perhaps, but I think Rhones are good to go with stewed and grilled meats.
Yeah, and I think actually for me, this last one, it's funny because on the sheet it said duck breast with, well, it says with dried apricots, but actually this last one, when I tasted it earlier before I read that sheet, I was like, this could just be, this will just be divine with just a grilled sliced duck breast with like a cherry compote sauce on top, and I think it would just go so nice, or cassis as well, cassis sauce, some sort of rich fruit sauce with duck, I think would just go wonderfully with this.
I've actually made a lovely sauce with that lamb cassis, the creme de cassis that they make. That makes a lovely sauce. Really good. And Randine is saying that it is surprising how wonderfully different these three Merlots are, which is really
they are all very different, but for me there is still this sort of house style that comes through. So they're all very pure. They've all got really ripe fruit, but they've all got this tangy minerality as well. So I think I think they've done a really good, really nice job, and I'm so pleased that they taste so well for our first, the Master's Case selection. So the selection, the wines, the case is put together at the same time as we put together all the wines for the Cellar offering. So as you'll probably have seen, or if you're new to Opimian, you may not know, but the last 12 months or so, we have increased the number of wines that are in the Cellar offering, and also there are some that are on the, well, this was a web offering completely, but most offerings are in the printed document, and then there's a few wines online. And the Master's Case, really, what I'm looking for are wines that really demonstrate the region that we're featuring in that Cellar offering and the producers that are there, and try and, you know, if you think about the Ardèche, the southern France, these great varieties are very, very typical. I think the quality of these three wines for the price is outstanding. We also try and do a case which will have wines that are pretty accessible and ready for drinking straight away, but with one or two wines in there that will hold out and mature for a little bit longer than that in the cellar. And I definitely think that the Cabernet, the third wine for me, has got, I think they've all got several years in front of them, to be honest, but that third one in particular will be very nice to try again in 4 or 5 years' time. So
and Sandra's got the right idea. She's used a Coravin to just take a glass out of each, and she's going to try them again. So
yes, so for those people that don't know Coravin, I use it a lot as well. Not obviously for everything that I taste for Opimian, because you couldn't Coravin 200 wines each week when I'm tasting those, but I do use it. So I've got one actually just up in my cupboard, if you hold on. So for people who don't know, this is Coravin, and it's a system that allows you, it has a little needle here, and you have a, a capsule containing nitrogen in there. And sorry, it's not nitrogen, it's argon. I should.
Nitrogen works too.
And basically you sit this on, so this is open now, obviously, so it won't work, but you sit the contraption on the top of your bottle, you push the needle through the cork, you pump the gas into the bottle, which then displaces the wine into your glass. So it's a system for you to taste and try your wines. The rest of the bottle, you then sort of pull the needle out. If it's got a good cork, the cork, because of the elasticity of the cork, will reseal the bottle straight away. And so you can try your wines intermittently over a period of time. And I've actually, I mean, for some wines I've kept for several years to see what would happen. And in most instances, occasionally you'll get a cork that doesn't do its job properly. But it's a brilliant tool. And I don't know about Canada, but here in London, a lot more of the restaurants and wine bars are using not necessarily exactly the same system as that, but they will use Coravin to offer a much wider range of wines and some very expensive and special wines so that people can have them by the glass now. So I think it's something really, really good.
Yeah, the higher end restaurants in the major cities like Toronto and Vancouver are doing that with either Coravin or with a Eurocav right on the counter, right? Where I've seen some restaurants with 20 or 25 in a Eurocav that you can get by the 5-ounce glass.
Yeah.
It's and I think that the glass programs are getting more and more popular. We'll have to see what COVID has done to that, right? Because they've depleted their cellars now, and it'll be a very different platform, I think, the restaurant business these days.
Yeah.
So Irene is asking if these wines will be offered again. Do you want to take that one, Jane, or do you want me to?
No, well, I'm happy. Either of us could say it, but I mean, generally, no, you go for it. You go for it.
No, just simply that because of the nature of CWEB 20, we had thought, we had decided that we wouldn't offer these wines again in 21, simply because it was to be a unique offering. A huge number of the wineries have been delighted with their partnership with Opimian and have asked to come back. And you may know this better than me, Jane. I know that some of them are going to come back in 22. Did you and Anna and Greg decide to put any in 21?
Yeah, so we've got not this particular estate, but there were a couple of others from southern France in this same CWEB. So I think it was Chateau Jus-Clary, Domaine Bacquière, maybe. But there, and I'm actually working on, I literally tasted all those wines and I'm writing that offering right now. So there are a few that are coming back. But as you say, in the main, most of them were sort of one-offs, and
they'll want to go back to the on-trade, won't they? in their local.
Well, I think it's always the dilemma, actually, is getting the right balance between being able to offer some new and different things each year and following certain properties longer term. And you can't offer everything all the time. So.
No. And it's not always our choice. So Irene and Alana, the answer is maybe. So are there any other questions?
And they can be more general, other questions if you like. It doesn't have to be about, or I probably shouldn't say that, do they? Someone will come up with something that I can't answer at all.
But then we can always get back to them at another time. That's yes. This isn't stump the master of wine. That's not what the idea is, right?
I think also one thing I would say is I think it would be, as I said at the beginning, I think it would be really nice if we can find the right formula to make this as interactive and as informative and as fun as people you know, as it can be. So if people have got ideas about what they would like me to talk about, how you would like to see the tasting done for the next sessions, as Michael says, they're going to be regular sessions. The next one actually will be featuring Australia and the 3 wines that Beck Hardy put into a master's case for that. And I think that Beck might even try and join us on that call, which would be great if she can. Unfortunately for
Up
her,
at 3 in the morning.
it'll probably be the middle of the night for her, but I know that
right.
she's a great sport and she does that sort of thing. So yeah, so just let us know. Are you doing the video for the current Cellar? Well, you'll have to wait and see. That will be a surprise. But yes, hopefully we skipped one. I apologize for that. But that should be, well, as I say, we skipped one. So I guess we're asking for the Cellar offering 286, which is open right now. Probably not is the answer to that.
So now's your chance, Alana, to ask the question.
Yeah, ask what you want to know. But hopefully we'll be back on track with 287. So.
Right, and survey questions, Stephen, that's a good idea that we could ask a few things. Oh, and Jane, here you are. You have to tell her your favorite child. Which is Alana's asking
What should I buy? Do you know what? Right. I've just actually today sent a whole article to Zoe and to Kim Chen about when people ask me what should I buy, how do I answer the question? Alana, I don't want to sort of try and not tell you what you should buy, but the difficulty is obviously we all have different sort of preferences for different wine styles. So my first question to anyone when they ask me what should I buy is, well, what sort of wine do you like? Are there any, you know, what are your favorites so far? Are there any particular grape varieties that you like, regions that you like? And I use that then as a starting point to sort of try and hone down and point people in the right direction. Otherwise, it's very, very difficult to say what people should buy. If you do want just quick and dirty suggestions, then I would always say take a look at the coup de coeur, because every single Cellar offering, my 4 coup de coeur are actually the wines that just blow me away in the tasting. They score the highest. And there's sort of, as I'm sure you know, there's 2 sort of different aspects. There's one which are wines that just blow me away, that are accessibly priced for everyday drinking, ready to drink, and just absolutely delicious. And then there are 2 that score very, very highly, that blow me away, that are things that have a bit more potential, a bit more special, things to be kept or to be drunk on special occasions. So those are worth looking at. I'm just going to have a look and see what my
and Jane, if I can interject there quickly, is that what we've been trying to do in these Cellar offerings is to have different points of view for you to follow, Alana. So what you'll find is, as you get farther along, I always call it's like the Siskel and Ebert of movies, where you would follow one or the other of them because they had different tastes in movies. So that's why Greg and I have added our picks, and I noticed that I did the Vervet from San Marco. I had that this week with a meal, and just this afternoon I had the Stepgewürztraminer with a wonderful kale and chicken salad that worked really, really well. And what I can tell you from having been doing one of these, we did this with Stefano Girelli. From, help me there, Jane, from
Wine People,
right? Wine People, and then also he's with Cortese, yes, with the really nice T-shirts that we had, and he spoke so eloquently about 2606, the Senia. It's a Nero d'Avola that I'm absolutely definitely going to buy a case of that. There's no question. But and I do agree with you, Jane. The coup de coeur are just no-brainers. That
the coup de coeur, and then I think the other thing. So you know, if people are looking for some sort of direction or easy things, I think the master's case is a good way of building up your experience and knowledge of different sort of grape varieties, regions, and things, and sort of learning from that as you go. The coup de coeur And then also the feature that you do now, the Cellar Up feature, which uses all these different categories of wines. So actually, it's not something I've talked with Michael about yet, but what was going through my mind earlier today was whether we should, and maybe this would be something that members can tell us whether they would like or not, is whether we should actually categorize every single wine in the Cellar offering under these categories. Because if you like full-bodied whites, then you can find them a bit more easily. Don't know, possibly. So the other thing, I think, to try and help people find wines that they like, and it links into those categories, is I think descriptive tasting notes are, should be helpful, and that's why I try to describe each of the wines. So that if you like toasty oaked wines, then you should find some of those flavor descriptions in the notes, so that on the other hand, if you prefer more subtle fresh fruit flavors, you don't like oak, then again it should come through in the tasting notes.
And Patrick, we will get to your question, I promise, but one last thing for Alana. She was looking for dry Rieslings. So then the Pflüger single cru case is perfect, because there are 3 very distinct Rieslings. Page 47, it's number 2675. I'm in the right one, right? 286. That's the one we're in now, right? Because I'm always working on 5 of them. And I have one of those in the fridge right now, the Mickelsburg, that I'm going to be drinking, and that's great. If you like dry Rieslings, Alana, you can't go wrong with that one.
And I would say also the Steppe Riesling 2680 is always a good bet. I mean, Gerd's Rieslings are just stunning.
I absolutely agree.
So
Patrick is asking, speak a bit about the learning process for noting different flavors and noses. Do you want to go back to WSET 1, Jane?
Well, I was going to say, a lot of this is about just find, and I think people have different ways of describing aromas that they pick out and smell. So it comes from experience, and I think it comes from just taking the time to try and describe to yourself in your head, or written on paper, or to read the notes as you're tasting and say, does that make sense to me? Do I understand it? And then there's so many resources available, as you say. There's WSET, not just if you're sitting the exams, but there's all sorts of materials that they provide that will help people understand the descriptions or the characteristics of different grape varieties, different wine styles from different regions. And it's you just build it up as you go, and I think you just keep it simple. And if you like a particular grape variety, then try that variety from other places, because they will be different, but you will start to learn yourself about what you enjoy. And the other thing I would say is that just because you've like one particular style doesn't necessarily mean either that you won't like other styles of wine. So don't limit yourself too much. Be a bit more adventurous, I suppose, and try a few things. And
we're far enough in the process now, Jane, that I can tell members that we are going to become what's called an APP. We're going to be providing WSET. That's the Wine and Spirits Educational Trust. We'll be offering WSET 1 to members. It'll be offered online, and it's going to be offered over 3 weekends, 2 or 3 hours per weekend. And you learn these basics of tasting, and we'll be recommending the wines you have with them, so you'll be able to compare and contrast, and the teacher will go through with you how to do that. So, and I can tell you, when I started my wine education, I got what's called an essence kit. You can find them online, and then you can compare the wine. You smell your wine, and then you go to the essences. It's a little box with each individual essence, and you can make the comparison. If you're looking for pear, you can see pear,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. I found that extremely helpful.
There's a great one, I don't know if it's the same one you're talking about, called Le Nez du Vin, which Jean Lenoir developed, which is great. And you can get actually quite a big box, which has got something like 130 different smells in. But you don't have to do that either. You don't have to do it that way. It's no different from cooking or smelling, tasting anything else. Just, you know, when you're out buying fruit and veg, smell them. When you're cooking, when you're chopping up herbs, smell them. Just try and, you know, you learn as you go, and it becomes it's absorbed in your brain, and then the more you do it, the more natural it becomes, and the easier it becomes. But you don't have to do it if you don't want to either. I am a fundamental believer, you know, despite the fact that I love wine and I want to know all about it and where it comes from and who made it and what side of the hill it was grown on and all of that. You don't have to. The most important thing is that you enjoy it yourself, and you can do as much or as little as you want. Just enjoy it.
Yeah. And Marc Andre is asking, he's curious about the Pinot Noir from Germany. Would you say it's more similar to a French Pinot Noir or an American Pinot Noir?
I'd say much more, well, different to both, but closer to French style and than to an American. Well, having said that, you see, there are always exceptions. That's the problem with wine. Having said that, obviously there are some Oregon Pinots that are very close in style to Burgundy as well. And in fact, what have I just tasted? I just tasted something recently, a Pinot Noir from somewhere quite unusual, and I can't think what it was now, but again, just very, very close to a French Pinot it was, and just blew me away actually. So I'm not sure whether that helped him or not, but
no, I absolutely. I think that defines it really well.
The Pinots in this cellar offering, in fact, I think we've got quite a few German Pinots in here. Sorry, I get very confused because I have a little brain, and I'm working on so many different wines, and so far ahead, I can't remember exactly what's in here. But what I do remember is just how good the German Pinots were this year.
Yeah, Alex Fluger has one.
Alex and Gerd's got one, and both of them were really, really tip top. Yeah.
Agreed.
So,
all right. Well, if there are no other questions, Jane, I think that we can let you go to your evening, and we will be able to do this again, and we'll take some feedback from the membership. And can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. This has been a lot of fun, and can't wait to see if Beck joins us next time, and we should have a great time. And those of you who are not in the Founders Program, you should know that Founders Choice is also available. Jane chooses a wine that is both drinkable upon arrival, and then it's also cellarable. And if you belong to both programs, you get 5% off the master's case. And then what I find, I'm in both, and so I get some cellarable wines and some for tasting right away. And I'm going to get to do these tastings with Jane. So it's a really good mix, and it takes away. I just read something recently. It was the tyranny of choice. It takes away the tyranny of choice because Jane chooses for you. So I think that that's a really cool way of doing it. So thank you so much. Thank you, Kim Chen, for running the board for us today. And Jane, we will see you again soon.